when they first started the family, but then along came 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 kids, and jobs and house payments and car payments, and they put their fiddle away. And then years later, they would get it out, and most of them still knew how to play. But why don't you tell us about your start, because you don't have that background.
No, I didn't have that security, unfortunately, but I was helping to take care of my father for a while, and I'd gone over to take him dinner in the evening, as I had been doing for a while, and I noticed that he had company, and I went right in the house like normal, and I noticed he had a small fiddle. He was fixing up this fiddle for this person to take lessons, and I said, "Did you know this lady very much?" And he said, "No, she's a neighbor and she wants to learn how to play fiddle." And I said, "Well, we should write down her name and number at least in case she changes her mind and you can't get your fiddle back." And he says, "We'll get it back." And I said, "Well, that's wonderful." I said, "Why don't you fix me up with a little fiddle, and then you can teach me, and you and I have something to do when I come over instead of just work." And he said, "Do you really want to learn?" And I said, "Yeah." But I had no idea what "yeah" was going to be. Change my life. And so he taught me a tune. It was called "Jesus, Lover of My Soul," and he had told me that was the first tune that he'd ever learned himself. So I thought, well, that can't be too bad, and so I took this little 3/4 size fiddle that he gave me and went home that night, and I learned that tune after supper, and then I went over with supper the night after, and I said, "I learned that tune." He says, "You did?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Did you bring your fiddle?" And I said, "No." He had a really stern look, I'll call it a stern look on his face, like I always take my fiddle along. So that was lesson number 2. And so I stood at the dining room table looking out the big picture window into the back of the fields, and I began to play it. And I couldn't face him, and I finished, and he said, I'll remember these words forever. He said, "Well, Judy," he says, "that was good." He said, "Do you want my fiddle when I'm done with it?" I said, "Yeah." Never knowing. In a short time, I was on my own trying to learn, and some wonderful friends, many of them that are here today to support me, came to my home, and they wanted to do something. They were as much at a loss as I was, and they wanted to do something about preserving my dad's music, not necessarily only the ones that he wrote, but those that he played over a long part of his life. So I said, "Yes, we can do this, but I just would like to be able to make it a combination family history and music book." And that's how this wonderful life of mine began.
Well, thank you. Where are you playing your fiddle these days?
Anywhere they'll let me in.
Have to be more specific.
Well, I travel to festivals much like this one. None of them compare. Each festival has its own thing that is very special to me, but the ones that I go to, of course, are the ones that those wonderful friends that I met go to as well, and I sit in the back and try to learn how to play tunes, and through the years I've gotten so that I can sit a little bit closer. And one time my friend Jim McKinney was sitting in the back of a jam, and he came into the jam, and he grabbed the chair that I was sitting in, and he picked it up and he folded it up and set it down next to 2 other great fiddlers, he being one, and he said, "This is where the fiddlers sat." That was probably one of the first times that I thought, well, maybe I can do this. Encouragement. And I just go to festivals, and basically the same ones every year, and I just enjoy it a lot, and started going to Canada. My friends Paul and Cindy Goals had band, and they were walking one evening in Canada at Pembroke, and they heard this gentleman, Bruce Armitage, playing, and they thought they reminded them a bit of him, my father, and so they said, "Judy, you've just got to go." And I just never dreamed in a million years that I could get to Canada. couldn't get to Grand Rapids, on my own at that time, but I go every year, and I've learned to be a friend of Bruce's, and it's just a wonderful thing.
Well, speaking of wherever they let you in, have you ever been thrown out?
No, sir.
Oh.
Not yet.
I was really looking forward to that story. That one didn't happen.
No, not yet.
Well, I also mentioned in the program that that your father, Les, was well known as a fiddler, and well known just simply as a person too, and many friends. But you're not a second-generation fiddler, are you? It's not your dad and you, is it?
No, and I didn't know that until Jim McKinney was researching what material that I had, and found out that I'm the fifth-generation fiddler and the first woman.
Okay, in the book, yes, that's very good. A breakthrough, yeah. You and Susan B. Anthony. She was a fiddler too, wasn't she?
I don't know, but I'm not sewing a flag.
I heard she was. Got thrown out of a few taverns, or maybe that's somebody else. Somebody who carried an axe. You don't carry an axe, do you?
No.
Hey, Jeff, you're rambling so much I forgot my next question. Well,
you were talking about
how
what?
is it, unless it's an inherited thing, you seem to be very set on passing along the old tunes too. And how do you do that?
I do that by going to these festivals and meeting people, listening a great deal, and taking the Come Dance With Me book that Jim McKinney and I have produced with the help of probably everybody in this audience and many, many more that have given us material to put a tune on paper so that it can be played for years to come. And I started a foundation, and the money from the sale of the book and 3 CDs that Jim was able to get made, and so we could, mostly I think for me, so I could hear them, but it's for everyone to hear them. And that's what I do. I promote those books and CDs wherever I go, and I'm particularly interested in finding young people that show an interest in the style of fiddling that I do. You hear a lot about Michigan-style fiddling, but there's many, many Michigan-style fiddlings that you hear about, and everyone is different, and yet the music makes it the same.
Now, on the CD, are these recordings of your dad and some of his generation, or are these new recordings that you and Jim and other people might come up with? What are these?
Most of them are recordings that my dad had made. It might have been from a previous cassette recording and then they were put onto the CD, or it might have been like if you had a cassette recording at home that you ran across that you'd recorded at a jam session at Everett or anywhere else, of him leading a jam and other people joining in. And Jim had the talent of cleaning up those cassettes and taking out the chatter sometimes and adding chatter to other places, but so that the music could be heard. And it's definitely a trip through my dad's music being played by him, because like back in the 80s, he's much quicker when he played, I noticed, when I hear them. And then later on, I heard him on a recording saying, you're just playing too fast. And when I got to know the people that knew him in music, and I did not know him in music like these folks did, that was a common statement that they made to me. It is, this is no hog wrestle. This is no hog wrestle. You just got to slow this down. Speed is not necessarily good music. So as he played in later years, this is the way I hear it. I'm not saying that this is absolutely so for everyone else, but when I hear it, I hear him learning that the tune can be heard much better if it's played at a slower speed.
Well, you know, there is an open mic, I guess you'd call it, or a jam at Nashville, Michigan, the real Nashville, and I happen to remember that the first time I played there that your dad gave me very similar advice. Mainly, play too fast and you play too loud.
There you go.
Yeah, I think he was right about that. Well, I see sitting out in the audience here someone who could probably say a lot of stuff about you, but I think he promised not to say everything he knows. Jim McKinney, would you come up here and lend a little bit of support up here?
What do you want to know?
A little.
I don't know if she really got thrown out.
Not that I've heard of. I knew who Les was, and I think he recognized my face, but that's about it. And I didn't even know that he had a daughter. I'd never met Judy until they called a meeting for everybody to come and talk about how to honor Les and preserve his music, and that's when I met Judy.
I wanted to ask you, oh, it's a better mic. How come Judy got the good mic and I didn't? Oh, all right. Well, anyway, I wanted to ask you about Judy's playing because I can remember when Les was inducted, there was a group of you. Is that the same group you're going to have today, or similar people? Or the same? Same ones. Anyway, I can remember you playing a real nervous version of Pig Ankle Rag, and in fact, they're playing it right now, actually. Sound a lot like that. But anyway, I noticed that you don't play the same way. What do you have to say about that, Jim?
I don't play the same way
No,
Judy
Judy doesn't play the same way she did a few years back.
She's come a long way. She's learned a lot. She's really applied herself to her music. She's getting more influences from Canadians and other folks she plays with.
Canadians? Is that okay? Is that acceptable to us?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Big blending of Canadian and Michigan fiddling.
Oh, gosh.
Always has been.
This is a surprise.
Oh,
Yeah.
she's doing great.
Well, I wanted to ask Judy one more question. I forgot when you were at that point. And I wanted to ask you, what is the reaction of the young people when they hear this 100, 200-year-old fiddle music and so on? I don't think of the young people doing that, but what do you find?
I think it depends. I'm meeting these young people at festivals, basically, and I think that they have been taking lessons in technicality of playing violin, which is a great recommendation of mine. It certainly would have made my life a whole lot easier, but I didn't do that, and I'm not going to do that. So, but if that child has been inspired by hearing fiddle tunes after they've been taught to play technically, I think it's my duty to make sure I can do all I can do to help their parents, to help them, to get started at this if that's what they want to do. And I don't think it will hurt any of them to play a few fiddle tunes.
Yeah, do some of the techniques apply over to some of the music they might play, like some more formal music or classical music? Do you know anything like that?
I know nothing about technicalities. I just know what I feel, and I hope that some of that feeling comes out in them if they get some excitement and their parents decide they'd like to send them to some place who can teach them.
Very good. Well, I'll tell you what, we are going to get your selected group up here now. And before we do that, would you like to have a closing comment or two?
Sure. it's very awkward to be here in this position when I look out and see people that I've played with, and they've technically allowed me to play with them for a number of years now and still support me by saying, sure, I'll be there. And I want to thank all of you for coming and sitting here as we kind of wander on about my short musical career, and I hope that you're not trying to put me out to pasture so that I don't get to do this anymore. But particularly my immediate family and my friends, of course. And I love sitting here looking out and seeing my son staring back at me and enjoying what's happening from his mom. And there's just so many people. It's just so wonderful. They've helped me so far along the way. And thanks an awful lot for coming today to surprise me.
Well, we're now about to go to the presentation part. So if I could call up, well, thank you very much, Jim, for your comments. Appreciate that. If I could get Big Wild is right behind me. This will be the plaque. Got Judy's picture on there, of course. Judy Raber 2014. That will go into our collection with the rest of the great fiddlers that we've had throughout the years. And so if you will make that presentation, then we'll have a personal plaque for Judy to take home.
Okay, on behalf of the Michigan Fiddlers, Judy, I'd like to present you with this plaque designated into the Hall of Fame. We welcome you in.
Thank you, Dick. And now, Judy, you get to take this home. This is a nice plaque. The same picture that's on there. But anyway, it says at the top, Judy Raber, Fiddlers Hall of Fame, Hillsdale, Michigan, August 9th, 2014, signed by Richard Wild, the president of the Michigan Fiddlers Association. And thank you very much for all you've done. Now, we're going to have some music, and Judy, you're going to be standing up there fiddling with the big boys. You okay with that?
I'm really okay with that.